and welcome to the Martini Shot. My name is Brandon, and today we are going to be reviewing the 2022 sci-fi epic Avatar, The Way of Water. But before I do that, we are going to be diving into a blue tropical cocktail I call the Waters of Pandora. And hey, if you enjoy movie reviews and movie-themed cocktails, be sure to leave a like and hit that subscribe button if you'd like to help support the channel. Okay, so I wanted the flavors of this cocktail to be reminiscent of the ocean, but also of the forest, with some more floral flavors, kind of calling back to the first Avatar film, and these ocean flavors calling back to this film. So we're going to combine them into one cocktail. Let's go ahead and start. So first we're going to be adding a little bit of gin to bring in some botanical flavors to the drink, and we're going to do 1 ounce. Next, we're going to be bringing in a little bit of that beachiness flavor with some coconut rum. We are also going to be doing 1 ounce. All right, let's go ahead and up that botanical flavor even further with some elderflower liqueur. You don't really need a ton. This will definitely overpower the cocktail if you use too much. I think all you're really going to need is 1/2 ounce. And now let's bring in some natural sweetness with some lemon juice. We are going to do 3/4 ounce. And now, of course, we couldn't end with the last cocktail of the year without the most consistent ingredient across this entire channel, which happens to be blue curacao. We're going to be using this not so much for flavor, but more for color, so you're only going to want to do about a splash. And then finally, let's add just a bit more variety to those botanical flavors with 2 dashes of lavender bitters. All right, let's add ice to our shaker and shake to chill. For this drink, you're going to want a rocks glass. Let's throw some ice in here, and we can go ahead and strain. All right, so now let's add a little bit of bubbles to make it more akin to the ocean with some sparkling water. The amount you're going to be using is wholly dependent on how big of a glass that you have. As you can see, I've already kind of filled this up all the way, so I won't be using too much, so your results may vary. And now for the garnish, let's go ahead and throw a bright red cherry on there. And then to really drive home that ocean feel, we're actually going to be adding a bit of sea salt to the top of this drink. Now you might think this is kind of weird, but when you really think about it, you already salt your food and cocktails, they're both working with different flavors, sometimes very similar flavors, and salt can really change the taste of food, so why wouldn't you try to do it with some of the cocktails that you make? I think adding a little bit of salt to your cocktail can really change your perception of the flavor and how it tastes to you, and can completely transform some drinks into a completely new experience. And because this is a ocean-themed cocktail, we gotta have a little bit of saltiness anyway. And there you go, now you have the Waters of Pandora. So very upfront with the coconut rum at first. You kind of get this creamy texture that kind of comes naturally with anything coconut flavored. But then as that starts to kind of fade away, you get more of those botanicals. It almost comes in almost a little bit bitterly, but not super strong, nothing like an Aperol or anything like that. But you do get a little bit of that lavender. You definitely get the elderflower, definitely makes its way through. And it kind of pairs with that gin a little bit. You really get those flavors of juniper berries really kind of being pulled up by the rest of the botanical natures here. And yeah, the salt makes it a very interesting taste. You definitely get a little bit of saltiness, but not overbearing as if like you had salt all across the rim. So it's this nice level that really kind of changes the complexity of the drink without being too much of a extra flavor that you have to also juggle in your mouth alongside these beach kind of flavors and the more botanical floral flavors. Now that we have our drink, let's jump straight into the review of Avatar, The Way of Water. It feels like an absolute eternity since the original Avatar took the world by storm. And what an interesting storm it was, because it somehow became the highest grossing movie of all time, and yet seemed to barely make a sizable impact on the pop culture zeitgeist. Sure, it was talk of the town the year it came out, but I've struggled to remember almost anything substantial about it as the years have gone by. From what I remember, it was an undeniable theatrical spectacle that showcased some of the best special effects the world had ever seen. The story and characters were not very memorable. It certainly seemed like something that was absolutely designed to be enjoyed on a big IMAX screen with surround sound that would envelop you in a new world, with the story and characters more just being set dressing. I will say this has made it rather difficult to revisit so many years later, as watching it on a comparatively smaller screen just doesn't give you the same effect. Now we are over a decade removed from that first film, finally getting the next installment in this apparently 5-film franchise. To say I was excited about it was a bit of a lie. I wasn't into the hype back then and wasn't exactly over the moon about returning to the world of Pandora. Yet the only thing I could hope for if I was going to sit through a 3-hour-long film is that it would manage to build upon the first film and show actual growth, as well as making me give a damn about the franchise in general. Well, if there's two things you can bet on, it's James Cameron and water. Avatar: The Way of Water is a genuine improvement over the original nearly across the board. The story, characters, and even the special effects have all been elevated this time around. The dreaded 3-hour runtime is not nearly as grating as it could have been thanks to expert pacing that keeps everything steadily moving forward while remaining engaging. Some of the original film's issues are still persistent this time around, mostly in its writing, but even those become a lot more tolerable thanks to Cameron's impressive attention to detail and his understandable talent in crafting stories of grandeur. Many years have passed since the humans invaded Pandora and were fought off by the Na'vi. Jake Sully, our hero from the first film, has now embraced his full-blown life as a Na'vi, becoming a chief and starting a family of biological and adopted children with his lover Neytiri, including a human boy named Spider and the offspring of Sigourney Weaver's avatar from the first film named Kiri. All is well until the humans return, led by a new blue cat-eyed Colonel Quaritch, forcing Jake and his family to go on the run. This leads them to the Metkayina, a tribe located in the Isles of Pandora, who agree to teach them their seafaring ways as another impending war begins to emerge. While the original Avatar is no doubt a technological achievement, its lackluster story really held the film back for me. Luckily, the story this time around is a lot more engaging and filled with multiple different perspectives, which is nice because Jake Sully is not a very interesting protagonist. This time around, he's not always at the focal point of the narrative, though when he is, he's a bit more tolerable. Even though his whole plan to hide in another civilization while being hunted seems fairly reckless and dangerous. Neytiri also seems to take more of a backseat this time around, which is a bit of a shame considering someone of Zoe Saldana's caliber really brings the heat in some of the film's more emotional moments. The film does tend to focus on their children a lot more, which I did enjoy. Having these younger characters as the film's focal point really humanizes the story by including themes of assimilating to new environments, parental expectations, and finding purpose. The kids deliver some of the film's best performances, even if some of them aren't actually kids. Sigourney Weaver does the mocap and voice for Kiri, and it does make everything feel a bit weirder once I knew that. Her performance isn't bad, it's just hard to shake the fact that a 70-year-old woman is portraying a teenager, and no de-aging or voice modulation can make it any less weird. Like the first film, there's a pretty big environmental message present in the film. For whatever reason, I found it to be a lot more impactful this time around, possibly because of its dealings with protecting sea life. I guess just seeing whale-like creatures in peril makes me care a little bit more, even if the people hunting them are pretty stereotypical in their motives and attitudes. But sometimes I'm okay with the straightforward and surface level, evident by how much more I enjoyed Stephen Lang's role as the lead antagonist once again. This guy is just a straight hater who can't even be stopped by death when he still has a grudge to settle. He actually goes through some interesting character development, which helps elevate him beyond the stereotypical military man he played in the first film. For better or for worse, the characters and story mostly take a backseat to the film's visual flair, which, if I'm being honest, is kind of okay. Narratively, there's a lot of repetition of infighting between Jake's family and the Metkayina that gets tiresome, but come on, we're really here to have our socks blown off via out-of-this-world VFX. These are some of the best-looking science fiction special effects you're going to find, with everything from the creature designs to facial mapping to the environments being crafted absolutely masterfully. James Cameron is a man who knows what he wants and certainly puts the time and effort into achieving it, no matter how long it takes. You hear that, Disney? The subtlest details are finely tuned to make the world feel all the more real, from the way the water molds around the characters to the lighting adding appropriate depth that keeps the film's soundstage origins from bleeding through. When the action gets rolling, the film blows you away with impressively constructed set pieces full of some of the best VFX mayhem you'll see this year, culminating in a genuinely thrilling and impactful climax. With the film being 3 hours long, I absolutely have to give credit to the way the film is paced. So many big blockbusters fail to keep the film engaging throughout their gigantic runtimes, with a lot of evident padding and fluff. Yet I found myself completely invested in the film, as it barely ever lets you take a break when it comes to character development and action. Every scene and choice is deliberate and meaningful, making the story all the more engaging from beginning to end, and elevating an otherwise surface-level script to one of the best blockbusters 2022 has to offer. Maybe it's not exactly high art, but in a sea of loud, computer-generated VFX fests, you can actually make out the passion, heart, and care put into this film. It's an achievement not in how it changes the game, but how the game can still be made enjoyable with just a little bit of creative effort. You aren't going to be enlightened to a new understanding of humanity or emotion, but you are going to be shown what happens when the right people, time, and money come together to create one of the most thrilling roller coaster rides you'll find in a theater. I'm glad this seemingly mythical sequel has been realized, because if these films are really all James Cameron is going to do before he dies, well, it's not as bad as I thought it would be. For my rating, I'm giving this film 4 feathered arrows out of 5.